So now that we've got a basic Flask installation here, we want to look at how we can serve HTML files instead of just returning strings and make this much more useful. So to start with, we're going to use the Jinja templating. And if we come here and we look at pip list, Jinja 2 is what we're using. And Jinja 2 has some very specific requirements. So for instance, inside of the Flask test, or the project folder, inside the project folder, we need a new folder called templates. It's plural. And we need another new folder called static. Now, static is going to hold things that will not change. So things like our CSS files or any images or logos or anything like that would go in static. And then inside of templates, we'll have HTML files, and we've got a couple of different kinds of those that we'll look at here in a minute. But for right now, we're going to worry about templates. So inside of templates then, I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to call it index.html. So it's going to be just a basic HTML file. And in this file, I have just a link to the style sheet. I've got a title on there. There's just a simple statement in the body, and then I'm linking to an image. So this is just, again, just very basic HTML. So let me save this file. Now, inside of the static, I want a very specific directory structure. And as you can see here, you can kind of start to see it. I want my CSS in a CSS folder. So inside of the project directory, inside of the static folder, I might create a CSS, and I might create another one called images, or I might have one called logos, or one called scripts. Here's just a couple that I've identified: CSS and images. CSS has a style sheet. Images has just the Flask logo. And they show up here in Atom after I've added them into the project folder. Okay, looks like this. So now I want app.py to not return this string. Instead, I want app.py to return index.html. So instead of return hello world, I want it to return index.html. So this render template renders the template, the Jinja template. And it knows to go find the Jinja template in templates and then look in here. It looks for index.html. So if I'm going to render template, I have to import that so I can use it. And let's save this up. And let's start the Flask server. And let's see what happens. Very good. It's returning my template. And if I go to the other route that we have established for Mike, it's returning just that string. So this works pretty well. It would become cumbersome, though, if we have a bunch of index.html, or I'm sorry, a bunch of HTML files in here. And inside of each of those index.html files, we had to create the menu, and we had to create the footer, and all those kinds of things. So if we had 400 or 500 web pages in here, there would be a lot of duplicate code, and there would be a lot of areas where if we wanted to make a change to the menu or we wanted to make a change to the footer, we'd have to open up all of the files and save them. So we're looking for modularity. And so Jinja has a great way that we can get some modularity. And the way it does this is by creating a base template. Base.html. And we can put all of the stuff that the pages will have in common in this base.html, and then the different HTML pages will have content specific for that page. So let's take a quick look at how this might play out. So we'll come in here and grab everything HTML related. Okay, so everything up through body. And then we'll need some content in here somewhere. And then we're going to close up body. So here's everything that the pages will have in common. The body will be different. This will be a dynamic content across all of them, and then we'll close up the body. So we need a way that we can insert this dynamic content. And the way we can do that is with a body block. So wherever the dynamic content is going to go, I'm going to have a body block. So this page will load, and then for the body block, it'll go get the information out of that individual file and stick it in here. And then after that block has ended, then it'll just return to the HTML in the template. Now there's a couple other things that we would want. So this title, we can expect that's going to change across pages. And another thing is we're moving around. We can have different folders and stuff inside of this templates file too. So this where the style sheet is located might change as well. So we're going to do a couple of things to handle that. And the first one, we're going to put this page title. So open curly brace, then the name of the variable, and close curly brace, close curly brace. So it will get this dynamically as well. And I'll show you that here in just a moment. And the other thing we want to do is, instead of telling it where to go find the style sheet by going up one folder and then going into static and then going into CSS, what we basically want to say is find the root of the project directory. So go all the way to Flask test and then go into static. So whether you are one folder down, or if we have more folders in here and you're 3 or 4 folders down, it can always find style sheet. So here's a little snippet of code that lets us do that. So now this is saying to go to the root and find static. So find static. This is Jinja. Jinja expects there to be a static folder. So find static and then get into the CSS subfolder of static and find stylesheet.css. All right, so we've got 3 things coming in here, or 2 things coming in here from the individual page into our base template from the individual page. And one of them is going to be a variable for page title, and then the other one is going to be body content. So let's save this base template, and then we'll go modify index. So we know index.html is going to feed base.html right here, the dynamic content body block. So how are we going to get content in there? Well, if we look at index.html, we have 2 things that we're worried about here. Number 1 is we know we're telling Jinja that this particular file extends base.html. So first load base.html, then come in here, and where we see body block, load this content until we get to end block. So here's the start, here's the finish, and take that content and stick it here. Okay, so that's how we get the body. This is just created, right? This is Jinja telling it to telling this file to look for the static folder and then go into there. So the other thing that we're worried about then is this page title variable, and we'll pass it from the route. So let's come in here and edit our route now. So we were returning a template. The template that we're rendering a template. The template we are rendering is index.html. And we're going to do another thing. We're going to pass that page title variable. So comma, space, and then the variable that we want to pass, and then the details for that variable. Right? So here I'm just passing a string, but I could also pass a some kind of Python variable if I wanted to. So now when I go to the index, this function is going to run. This function renders the template index.html and it passes page title of my calculator. It goes to index.html and index.html says this extends base.html. Wherever you see body block, add this content in the block. Base loads up, parses top to bottom, left to right, and where it gets to this page title, then it grabs what app.py told it to place in there. It goes through and finds the CSS style sheet, and then it comes in, and where the body block is at, it adds the details from index.html. Now, the other thing that we have to worry about with index.html is this folder, this logo could potentially change. So let's use this same bit of code here. Now find the static folder, and inside the static folder look for images, and then look for flask.jpg. So let's save all this up and let's see what we get. We've made significant changes to app.py, so we need to restart it so it picks up the new app.py. And then let's go to our browser. It's good. So now I don't want the route Mike just returning the string, so I'm going to create a new template for that. Let's see, let's change this to last server homepage. And then we'll call this about Mike, I guess, I don't know. And instead of index, let's return Mike.html. One other thing to note, right now we're doing debug true. When we're ready to turn this loose and put it on a server, we need to change that to false. We don't want to debug on a server. Let's come in here, and can we copy? We can duplicate, that'll work. We're going to call it Mike. And so this extends the base. The base has that basic structure around it. Here's the different body that we'll insert. And when we go to load the page, we're going to pass a different page title to it. So let's see this in action. Again, we made pretty significant modifications, so we got to stop the server and restart it. So that's working as we expected. And we're returning a different web page now for our template. So again, in this video, we've been using Jinja templates inside of our Flask application to return HTML in a modular way so that we can have good maintainability of the site going forward. So the next thing we do is come in here and stop the server. We're in the project directory, so let's check the status. We have some new additions, so I'm going to add. I just want to add them all. Everything's being tracked now and staged. And I have the third commit, and I can see these additional files.